The story is about 4 college friends who sold their energy to the racetrack. Nick just went out to buy a few cups of soda and came back to sit down. The factory chair was broken and he turned his head down. The old building was next to the modernized race car, which was out of place. He asked his friends if it was safe here. Hunter told him not to worry, saying that there was a fence in front of him that could block everything. However, the engine of the race car continued to vibrate. The screws on the nearby pillars had already been loosened at this time. A piece of paper drifted to Nick's side. He remembered that there was a death list of racers on it. At the same time, there was a situation on the track. The oil of the repair station fell on the track. A car trying to rush back to the track slipped on the oil. It was almost a collision, but it wasn't the worst. A mechanic hadn't had time to pull out the screwdriver. Another race car rushed out. The screwdriver was taken away and dropped in the middle of the track. A butterfly effect was triggered. A tire flew into the audience and killed a man's wife. The frightened man squeezed a long chair. A race car exploded and the broken pieces of the flying ship cut off a couple's waist. A woman tripped and was trampled by the man. Then an engine flew in and smashed him to pieces. The man, who had lost his wife, stood by his wife's body and refused to leave. When he realized that he had to run away, it was too late. People rushed to an exit. A security guard kindly reminded them that the other side of the exit was also open, but the collision of the racing track 2 and 3 made the old building unbearable and the large structure began to collapse. Fortunately, it was all just Nick's premonition. He was holding his girlfriend Loli's thigh nervously. Everything in front of him was just as good as he imagined. He said there would be a cowboy with a hat sitting there. Then he said there would be a woman who stuffed the sanitary napkins into the child's ears, and his friends were terrified. Nick saw the car that was about to crash and he yelled, "I have to get out of here or everyone will die in the chaos." Nick punched a man named Andy in the face and accidentally knocked over Carter's beer. Carter let his wife stay where she was and he chased Nick to settle the score, but Nick didn't have time to explain that there was a terrible car crash in the venue. People began to flee and Carter suddenly remembered that his wife was still in there and he wanted to rush back but was stopped by the security guard George. At this time, a tire flew straight at them and killed Andy's wife Nadia. The accident left 52 people buried in the rubble and people silently gathered at the entrance of the racetrack to mourn the dead. Those who were saved by Nick's premonition came to thank him, but that's the way it is. Some people are grateful and some people are looking forward to it. Carter thought it was the security guard George who stopped himself and his wife who couldn't get out. He blamed his wife's death on George. When he returned home, Nick received another warning in his dream. He thought it was just a long nightmare, but he didn't know that death had already started to make a list. At the same time, Carter drove a broken car to George's house to avenge his wife. After seeing the lights on George's house, Carter walked to the broken car and picked up a cross and a shovel. The hook behind the car fell to the ground. He was going to bury the cross in George's yard and then burn George alive on top of it. At this time, a cold wind blew into the truck and a hanging life jacket hit the radio switch. The music suddenly rang out and a series of chain reactions were triggered inside the truck. Carter tried to stop the car but found that the door could not be opened at all. He stood there and screamed in anger. He didn't notice the tow hook under his feet and was suddenly hanged by the chain of the truck. The dragger followed the slide and was eventually burned to death by the gas leak. Nick saw the news on TV. He finally realized that it wasn't a dream and every detail of the accident scene had appeared in his mind the night before. At this point, he saw another illusion and it was obviously a warning, but he didn't know who the next one would be on the other side. Samantha was doing her hair and her 2 kids were playing outside and throwing little lions all over the yard. Samantha didn't notice that death had already cast her eyes on him. The hairdresser focused on styling him and didn't notice that he had a can of hair gel on him. At this point, the kids of Samantha ran in and fell to the ground with a slip of their feet. This scene was so scary that Samantha was so scared that she went out before she paid for it. A man drove by with a saw and a stone bounced out of the machine and hit Samantha's right eye. He died on the spot. After reading the newspaper, Nick called his friends and told them about his premonition. Death is taking people's lives in a series of accidents in the original order of death, but Nick can't remember who the next target is. Janet doesn't believe him. She thinks the first 2 deaths were just a coincidence. Hunk said, "Well, it's all destined to die. Why don't we just enjoy the rest of the time?" Obviously, he didn't take it seriously, but Nick's mind was still flashing with terrible illusions in order to figure out who the next target was. Nick and his girlfriend Loli returned to the abandoned racetrack and tried to recall all the details of the dream, but he can only remember the order of the first few people. At this point, George showed up. He brought 2 people to the surveillance room and took out the video of the day of the accident. Nick finally remembered the complete order of death. They realized that the next target was a mechanical vehicle. However, when they found Andy, they found that the place where he worked was dangerous. Suddenly, a car lift broke down and a car fell from above. Andy dodged backwards, but his body hit the metal protective net. The protective net cut open his body like a biscuit mold. According to Nick's premonition, Hunter and Janet were supposed to be the next victims, but the two of them died at the same time in the dream, so he can't tell when he's in danger, so they decide to split up and Nick goes to Hunter. Loli and George went to find Janet by the pool. A child sprayed Hunter with a toy water gun. He threw the water gun over the fence in a fit of anger, but the water gun fell in the wrong place. The maximum power mode of the drainage system was activated by accident at this time. A golf ball flew past and hit Hunter's lucky coin into the pool. He jumped into the water to fish but was washed away by the strong suction of the drain and was no longer able to break free in the end. The huge pressure in the pipe sucked out all of his organs at the same time. Janet was washing her car and a historical antenna was torn off by the washing machine. The whole autonomous car wash system stopped for a moment. Janet stepped on the gas door in panic and accidentally opened the skylight. A pipe above suddenly burst and water began to flow into the car. As the car was about to be filled, Janet pulled her head out of the skylight for help, but at this point, the car wash system suddenly resumed operation and pushed her body forward to the front of the car wash. The danger was near. Fortunately, George and Loli arrived in time. They pushed Janet's car back together and saved her life. Although Janet was saved, Hunter still died in the accident. It is impossible to determine whether the death list has been terminated or just skipped Janet. If the list goes on, the next target will be George. Many years ago, George's wife and daughter died in a car accident. Now he is ready to reunite with them. George calmly accepted his fate, but no matter what, he could not bear to end his own life. I took a bottle of painkillers and threw up and put the pipe on the exhaust pipe. They opened a bottle of champagne to celebrate the end of the nightmare, but when Nick packed up, the terrible fear woke up again. Later, the news reported that the cowboy-dressed man in the car accident, Joe Nas-san, was actually alive. Nick immediately realized that something was wrong. He jumped into the car and rushed to the hospital. On the way, he called George and told him that the next person who might be in trouble was Joe Nas-san. At this time, Joe Nas-san was lying in the ICU and his ward was a nursing home. A staff member forgot to turn off the faucet and the water began to leak downstairs. It happened to be dripping on Joe Nas-san's face and the ceiling was gradually cracking and collapsing. Joe Nas-san clung to the exit, but when Nick and George arrived, the bathtub upstairs had broken through the ceiling and killed Joe Nas-san on the spot. Obviously, the death list is not over. The next one is George. He was hit by an ambulance and his body flew out of the air. He died on the spot and now it was his turn. He had no idea that he was watching a movie with Jennifer. He had no idea that the danger was coming. In the room next to the cinema was under construction. A worker fell down the street to protect his glasses and the lens focused the sun on a pile of wood. The flame spread along the traces of oil and gas and eventually burned to the side of the barrel of liquid, and Nick found them in time. He grabbed Loli and wanted to take her away, but Jennifer wouldn't go. A few seconds later, the explosion occurred and Jennifer died on the spot. Fortunately, it was all just Nick's premonition. He knew he had no time to waste. He had to find Loli. As soon as he got to the cinema, the fire had spread and Nick took out the extinguisher from the wall, but the fire couldn't be put out at all. He could only throw the fire extinguisher to one side, and at that moment the set gun next to it suddenly caught fire and the nail shot out and pierced the fuel barrel. He also set Nick on the wall and the gas slowly flowed into the flame. Nick grabbed a long stick from the pile of burning debris and at the moment the flame was about to come out of the barrel, he rang the fire alarm. The fire was put out and he finally saved Loli. 2 weeks later, Nick, Loli and Jennifer sat in a cafe and thought they had finally escaped the death of the chase. Suddenly, a car crashed into the cafe in the direction of Manda, which was about to fall. Well, that's it for today's video. If you're interested in this movie, why don't you go and see the original? If you think my explanation is good, please give me a thumbs up. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue to create.